the cycle that we discussed is the standard or ideal vapor compression refrigeration cycle. Okay. So that cycle we wish to plot it on the vapor on the pH chart. As it was conveyed earlier, the pH chart is the chart that is used for plotting the vapor compression refrigeration cycle. Though we also show the nature of the processes on TS diagram, you don't get any such chart where the values are available, right? Or the plots for skeleton for the plots for different parameters like temperature, pressure, enthalpy, etc. are available. So it's normally conventionally plotted on pH chart. So let's see how you can plot the cycle talked about in the example on this chart. And we have solved this problem using the tables, but the same problem can also be solved using the pH diagram. Of course, the pH diagram, like the resolution would not be that good. For example, as you can see here, the pressure itself, it's given on log scale. So it's like if I want to get something between 1 megapascal and 2 megapascal, it will be very difficult to judge where that line would be. Okay, so it's for quick calculations and for visualization of different processes, right? So visualization of the processes or the cycle is an important thing that talks about the usefulness of this chart. It's not exactly for getting precise calculations. And nowadays you also have the softwares available where you can put the inlet parameters, two parameters, and you can get all other parameters, right? But we don't do that kind of exercise at this level. But that kind of tool is available to you. But here we do the manual exercises so that you understand the things, and after that you can use the tools whichever are convenient. Okay, so let us try and plot that chart, plot that cycle on this chart. So we may start with the compressor inlet. So what will be the condition of the refrigerant at compressor inlet or evaporator outlet? It is minus 20 degrees Celsius, and this is an ideal or standard vapor compression refrigeration cycle. So the vapor would be in saturated vapor form, right? Saturated vapor form. So we put that point here. So here you have different lines for temperature. Inside the saturation dome, the constant temperature lines match with the constant pressure line because the evaporation occurs at constant pressure. So we are talking about this temperature, minus 20 degrees Celsius. And when the vapor is coming out, it is at this state, saturated vapor state, right? So I can put that point on this chart. Okay, so let me put a small circle there, right? Just putting a dot, just a dot may not be easy to see. So what you may do is put a dot and then make a small circle over that. Okay, so that's the point, that is the compressor out inlet. Okay. After that point, it is getting compressed. It is getting compressed. So this is the point the outlet from evaporator or inlet to compressor, right? So that is the point. So that is point 1, right? This is point 1. What you normally show, the nomenclature that you normally give. Okay. Now the vapor is getting compressed. Now that process is isentropic as per the standard vapor compression refrigeration cycle. The compression is isentropic. Now where are the constant entropy lines on this chart? These are the constant entropy lines, 1.6, 1.7, 1.8, right? You can see S equal to 2.3 kilojoule per kg Kelvin. So these are the constant entropy lines. So the process should move along a constant entropy line. But this point is somewhere between two lines, 1.7 and 1.8, right? You can also compare it with the values that you found with the help of tables. Right? So it's somewhere between 1.7 and 1.8. It is going to move along isentropic line, but you have two lines around it, not exactly at that point. So you should draw a line such that it keeps the distance between the distance that line keeps between these two lines always remains proportionate, or the ratio remains the same, because these lines are not exactly parallel to each other. Actually, they are diverging, right? The gap between the two lines is increasing. So you should draw a line such that it maintains the proportion of the distance is same, right? So let us draw such a line here. So now we are going to draw a straight line, though it may not be a perfectly a straight line. So this is the line, right? So this is point 1, this is point 2, the outlet. Now where are you going to stop? You can go along this line, right, to a long distance, but where are you going to stop? You are going to stop at the condenser pressure, right? At condenser pressure, not at condenser temperature. Or you can say at condensing temperature, right? You are going to stop at the condenser pressure or condensing temperature. So the temperature at which the condensing is occurring, or the condenser pressure, whatever is defined, right? So what is the condenser pressure that is given? The condenser pressure given is 10 bar, right? Or it is 1 megapascal. It is 1 megapascal. So let us go up to that point. Where is 1 megapascal? This is the 1 megapascal line. So I have drawn it almost up to that line, right? So this is the line for the compression process, the isentropic compression process. Now the next line. The next line would be a horizontal line. Why would it be horizontal line? Because as per the assumptions in that cycle, it is constant pressure line. The desuperheating and condensation occur at constant pressure. So it's going to be a horizontal line. So let me draw such a horizontal line. So this is the horizontal line. Now I'm going to draw that line, but where would I stop? Right? The question is, where would I stop? So you will stop at the saturated liquid line, right? You will stop at the saturated liquid line. So you're going to stop here on the left hand side of this saturation dome, because the assumption in the standard VCR cycle is that the fluid coming out of the condenser is saturated liquid, right? So it is saturated liquid here. So this is your state 3. This is your state 3, 1, 2 and 3. Now the next thing is the expansion through throttle valve, which is a constant enthalpy process, So this is a pH chart. It means that the enthalpy is on the horizontal axis. So obviously constant enthalpy means a vertical line. So now for the next process, I'll draw the vertical line, right? It will be a vertical line starting from this point, saturated liquid, and it should be drawn up to which point? It should be drawn up to minus 20 degree Celsius, right? The evaporator temperature, which is minus 20 degree Celsius, right? So this is the line drawn. And I have to stop at this point at evaporator temperature minus 20 degree Celsius. So this is your point 4. So you can just cross check the numbers that you got with the help of tables and manual calculations, right? For example, what was the dryness fraction? So as this chart suggests you, the dryness fraction should be somewhere between 0.4 and 0.5. So I hope you also got some number between 0.4 and 0.5, right? If somebody can confirm and give me that number, you can post it in the chat box, okay, in the message box. So this should be the dryness fraction, okay, somewhere around 0.43 or 42 or 43 should be the dryness fraction of the vapor coming out of the throttling device or entering into the condenser. Okay, so this seems to be a bit high value of dryness fraction, right? Because actually the vapor is of no use in the evaporation process, which produces refrigeration. It's only liquid which is useful. It's going to boil and take away the heat from the product or space, right? So if possible, you should try and do something to increase or rather to reduce the dryness fraction, right? So later on we'll see that if you can provide subcooling, it could be possible. Okay, and there could be other means also, but in a system where the pressure differential is not very high, you don't go for other means like multi-stage compression could be possible, and at the end of the first expansion stage you take out the vapor, or such things are possible in advanced VCR cycle. But if it is a small system, you are not going to implement, and again if delta P is not very high, you are not going to do that or increase the complications or complexities like that. So this is the point at which you are coming out of the evaporator, right? And now the evaporation process. Okay, so the line for that can be drawn. So starting from this 0.4 and going up to 0.1, right? So we have plotted this cycle on the pH diagram. So this is the cycle 1, 2, 3, 4. You can give numbers to these points, and this cycle can also be used to get, let's say, delta H. Getting delta H should be very easy. You just need to drop vertical lines from different points and read the numbers from here, and you get delta H for that process. So for compressor, you can get delta H. Again, for evaporator, you can get delta H. So delta H for evaporator and delta H for compressor, right? The ratio of those two gives you COP. So for fast calculation and for visualization of process, this is a good tool, but of course it cannot give you very accurate numbers because of like the resolution and your judgment are involved in this. Okay. So this is about plotting the cycle on the pH chart, and this is an ideal cycle. Now, in practicals, you have been given certain readings, and what you find there is that the vapor that is coming out of the evaporator is not exactly in saturated state, right? There is a bit of superheating. If you already started going through that and started analyzing or doing calculations, you might have realized that the pressure that you read on the pressure gauge, if you find corresponding saturation temperature, it was somewhat less than 0 degree, which was the evaporator outlet temperature. It means that it's not exactly coming out at this point, but it is slightly superheated, right? Second thing which might have been noticed is that second thing what you might again notice is the process is not exactly isentropic, right? Because if you put condenser pressure and the outlet temperature of compressor, you and join the outlet here from evaporator and the compressor outlet, you may find that it's not running parallel to these lines or not maintaining proportion between these two lines. Proportion of distances between these two lines. It means that the process is also not perfectly isentropic, right? So such observations you can write in conclusion, right? Such observation you can write in conclusion. In addition to your COP number, you can write critical observations in in the conclusions, right? Then this process is horizontal constant pressure. So pressure drop actually are also there, but in practicals again we don't have any means to measure that pressure drop. We are assuming that the evaporator and condenser pressure is remaining constant, right? Then what you also might have found is at condenser pressure, whatever is the saturation temperature, you find that the liquid refrigerant is coming out at a lower temperature than that, right? As I remember, the condensing temperature is somewhere around 42 degrees Celsius, and it's coming out at around 36 degrees Celsius. It means that there is around 6 degree of subcooling, right? So these are the topics that we will be discussing now, the deviation of the actual vapor compression cycle compared to the standard vapor compression refrigeration cycle. One of the reasons why you are getting this subcooling is actually the conditions, ambient conditions are very favorable right now. And the air is available at quite low temperature for cooling the condenser. In summer, the ambient itself will be at a high temperature, so your condensing temperature will also increase, and you will also struggle to get subcooling, right? Or fair amount of subcooling. But in winter, it is favorable, and you are getting good amount of subcooling in the condenser. Subcooling means your temperature is going, like assuming pressure remains same, it is going to move horizontally on this, right? And you are moving into subcooled liquid region. The pressure is remaining same, but the temperature is decreasing. How can you show that pressure is decreasing? Because here you can see that the temperature is around 40 or 42 was the temperature, right? In that case, of course, here it is in this example, it is 39.39 degrees Celsius, and in that case, it was 42. So 42, and then you move along this line up to 36. So you can see this is 30 and this is 40, right? So in that case, it was 42, and you slightly move on the left hand side up to 36 degree Celsius. So that is the subcooling that you are achieving. So when you are plotting the cycle there, you are going to take care of the little bit of superheating and some amount of subcooling, and then you are going to draw the cycle there. So there you are trying to draw the actual cycle, but of course the assumption of constant condenser pressure and constant evaporation pressure would still be there. And for compressor also, you show the actual process rather than assuming it to be isentropic. Okay. So this is about plotting the cycle on the pH chart. Let's now move to the next topic, and that is about the deviation of the actual vapor compression refrigeration cycle compared to the standard vapor compression refrigeration cycle. So that's the next topic, and there are some examples that you can also solve, right? Somewhat similar to what was done in class, but some parameters are changed. For example, rather than evaporator temperature equal to -20, you can take it -7. And same condensation pressure, let's say it is 10 bar or 1 megapascal, right? And for that you can evaluate the performance parameters. Those parameters were one of the most important is the COP, then the cooling rate that you get for the same flow rate of refrigerant, let's say. Then what is the outlet condition from the throttling device, the dryness fraction. Okay. So these kind of parameters we can find for the evaporator temperature equal to 7 degree Celsius, right? And obviously, because you have reduced the evaporator temperature, you should get the favorable parameters. That is, the parameter values performance would be better, right? Because the conditions are more friendly for the refrigeration system, right? And do the same exercise again, rather than taking condensation pressure equal to 10 bar. If you like, here the refrigerant is also changed and it may be solved for R22, and taking the condenser pressure equal to 16 or 17 bar, and you solve the problem again, and other parameters may be assumed to be the same, and then you can compare the things, right? You may make a comparative table and show what are the different parameters that you get in the one example that is already solved, and two more example given here. Okay. So now let us go to the next topic, that is actual vapor compression refrigeration cycle. The standard or ideal vapor compression refrigeration cycle makes some assumptions, and because of this, it is easy to analyze it, but we also need to understand the deviations from this cycle in case of actual VCR cycle. And superheat, one of the deviation is superheating of refrigerant vapor before it enters into the compressor. So you already witnessed that in the practical. Then subcooling of liquid refrigerant, again it has been observed in the practical before entry to the expansion valve. And pressure drops in heat exchangers. Of course, this has not been done in practicals, but in actual systems, from the knowledge of engineering or fluid mechanics that you already have, you know that whenever a fluid passes through a finite passage, it's having finite velocity, so there is going to be pressure drop in the heat exchanger. So the condenser and evaporator are nothing but the heat exchangers, right? And they are, in this case, the system that you saw in the practical class is that the refrigerant passes through tubes. So when it passes through that, obviously there is going to be a pressure drop in these heat exchangers, and there at the other place, so in tubings all in the compressor valve, etc., there is a pressure drop. So let us first discuss the superheating of refrigerant vapor. Now, why is refrigerant vapor superheated before it enters into the compressor? First thing is, as per the standard cycle, it would come out at this point, right? Saturated vapor. But why is it that in practice it it would be or it should be superheated? One thing is very sure, that you don't want, even from point of view of thermodynamics, you don't want the liquid to come out of the evaporator. You want to boil off all liquid. You can tell the reason, like very easily understand the reason, that you want to utilize all liquid refrigerant for this, for producing refrigeration. If you are not doing that, you are actually not using the capability of the system or capability of the heat exchanger, right? So you should design the heat exchanger such that the liquid is completely evaporated. If you don't do that, you are producing less cooling effect. In that case, you will have to increase the mass flow rates, and increasing the mass flow rate means the higher consumption of compressor power. So that's not desirable. Okay. So one thing is sure, that you don't want to be on the left hand side of point 1 when you come out of the evaporator. Now, in practical systems, you can understand that it's that you can never ensure that you will exactly come out at point 1, right? So you are keeping some safe margin and you are coming out slightly on the right hand side, right? So that's nothing but the superheating. And there are certain practical reasons also why the vapor that comes out of evaporator is always superheated, in addition to the superheat that is occurring in the evaporator. So it should be ensured that there are no now this is from point of view of compressor functioning, that there are no liquid particles present in the suction vapor entering the compressor. As the system operation is not perfectly steady, the system cannot be designed for dry saturated vapor at compressor inlet. Uh, to ensure completely dry vapor at compressor entry all the time, the systems are designed and operated with certain degree of superheat, right? So you don't want, two reasons why you don't want liquid at the outlet of evaporator. One, you want to use the capability of the system completely. You want to have the maximum cooling effect. You want to boil off all liquid refrigerant. So that's why you don't want any wet refrigerant to come out. That is one reason from point of view of thermodynamics. Now, from point of view of compressor, also most of the compressors are not able to take any liquid particles. Right? They are not designed to handle any liquid. They are designed to handle only vapor. So you should ensure that no liquid particles are coming out, and that's why you have to keep some safe margin, and you should come out at least slightly superheated when you come out of the evaporator. Second thing, as we may discuss it later, there is one expansion valve. Now the expansion device that was used in the system shown to you, it's a small system. So there it is capillary tube, but one of the other popular expansion device, or expansion devices also work as control devices. They basically control the mass flow rate of the refrigerant through the device. There are two things working in opposite way. One, the compressor is pushing the refrigerant, right? So that is giving a positive thrust, while on the other side, the expansion device is resisting that, right? It's a kind of resistance to the flow, and because of that, there is a pressure drop. So capillary tube is used in small systems where the refrigerant is critically charged, but other expansion devices are also there, and one of the very popular one, which we will see talk about in the practical class, also the second practical on the water chilling plant. So thermostatic expansion valve. Now the principle of working of that is itself based on the degree of superheat of refrigerant at the outlet of the evaporator, right? So obviously it will always ensure that there is some degree of superheat at the outlet of the evaporator. So and your compressor is after that point, right? That is, you will put the sensor for the thermostatic expansion valve at the outlet of evaporator, and there it should be slightly superheated. So obviously after that there is suction line and then compressor. So obviously when it reaches the compressor, superheated. Now if refrigerant vapor is at a very low temperature, because let's say we solved in the example which we solved, it was at minus 20 degrees Celsius in the evaporator. Now practically what we are assuming in the cycle is whatever is the exit point of evaporator, same is the entry point of the compressor. But in actual, that's not the case. There is going to be finite distance between the evaporator and compressor. If you think of the split AC, evaporator or the cooling coil is inside and the compressor is outside the room. So there is some distance between those two. And when the if it is at a very low temperature, could be for not for refrigeration, not for air conditioning application, but could be for some other application where the temperatures are low, like the way it was minus 20. So if it comes out at such a low temperature and if it gets exposed to the ambient, even if you insulate it, still there are chances that the surface temperature would be less than the dew point temperature. Now, the definition or understanding of the dew point temperature will be given when you like in the chapter on air conditioning. So if it is less than the dew point, then there will be liquid water which will be generated or over the surface of the suction piping. You already know what is suction piping. It's the piping which connects the evaporator with the condenser. Okay, so there could be condensation or if it is less than 0 degrees Celsius, then there could be frosting also. Now this is an undesirable thing. So one might want to slightly increase the temperature of the refrigerant even inside the evaporator, or not exactly in the evaporator, but sometimes, as the one diagram will be shown to you, there is a dryer loop that is used, and there you increase the temperature slightly so that the line, when it comes out of your refrigeration device, like the temperature is high enough so that there is no frosting or condensation over the suction line. Right? So that is another reason why there is some additional superheating done for the refrigerant inside the refrigerated area. Now, when it is outside the, you can say, compressor compartment, it is already superheated. Okay. And then there are other reasons also why it gets further superheated. So there is heat gain from ambient. So this is about the suction line, heat gain from ambient through the suction line joining the evaporator and evaporator and compressor. And then the compressor that you saw in the practical class, that black box, right? You couldn't see anything inside that, but we have supplied the old journal to you, and if you have studied that, the cut section of that hermetic compressor is shown. So hermetic compressor accommodates a compressor, and the motor winding is also coupled with that, right? And then it is welded, sealed and welded. So in a hermetic compressor, what happens is the refrigerant takes heat from motor winding also, as the hot compressor cylinder as well as hot compressor cylinder before it enters into the into the compressor, or you can say the cylinder of the compressor. Okay. Actually, in hermetic compressor, motor windings are cooled with the help of refrigerant. Right. So here the theory and the practice differs. Right. To increase the efficiency of the motor or to to ensure the safety and proper heat dissipation from the motor winding, the refrigerant itself is used. So it obviously it's going to get heated further, and that's the superheating of refrigerant. And then again it comes in contact with the like it's going to enter through the valves in the cylinder head. Before that it comes in contact with some other hot components also, and will get further superheating. Right? So in practice, before it enters into the compressor, it's always superheated. Now whether unrestricted superheating is desirable or not desirable, we are not denying the fact that it's always going to be superheated. But can you just uh, 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 like not take the note of the superheating or allow unrestricted superheating? The thermodynamics point of view, the answer is no. So let us analyze the effect of superheating on the performance or COP of the cycle. So what is the effect of superheating of refrigerant vapor on compressor work and COP? So let us investigate this matter. It may be clarified here that the compression process is not exactly isentropic, but rather polytropic, as there is some heat loss to the ambient from hot cylinder walls. So if you can touch the cylinder of the compressor, you will feel that it's hot, right? You already know what was the outlet temperature of the refrigerant uh, from the compressor. It was 56 degrees Celsius. Even in winter, in summer it would go even much higher. So if you touch the body of that compressor cylinder, then it is hot, right? So it means that it is in contact with the ambient, so it must be losing some heat to the ambient. So it's not a perfectly isentropic or adiabatic process. It is losing some heat, though not very significant if you compare it with the enthalpy change. But practically thinking, it is losing heat, so it's not perfectly adiabatic, but it is polytropic, not a perfectly isentropic but polytropic process, right? So you know how the work for a polytropic process can be calculated. It is nRT1. One is the compressor inlet temperature upon n minus 1. Now n is the polytropic index. If it is adiabatic, you can write gamma for that substance, for that chemical. And ratio P2 upon P1. P2 is the compressor outlet pressure and P1 is the compressor inlet pressure, raised to n minus 1 upon n minus 1. So this is the formula for polytropic work in kilojoule per kg. So compressor work depends upon pressure ratio P2 upon P1, value of polytropic index N, and entry temperature T1. You can see the multiple outside the bracket nRT1. So if your T1 is higher, you're going to write absolute temperature here. So if your T1 is higher, you get you are going to get higher work in kilojoule per kg of refrigerant circulated. So higher entry temperature to compressor means more the degree of superheat, higher the work consumed per kg of refrigerant circulated. Thus, if the vapor is superheated at the entry to the compressor, work per kg of refrigerant circulated increases. This fact is also seen from nature of isotopes on the pH chart. Right. So what we are trying to say here is, if you look, if you have a look at this, you that has been already noticed that these lines are diverging, right? So if you go along this, and when you that is, if you superheat it, and let's say we superheat it up to this point, right, up to the entropy equal to 1.8, right? So that would be a temperature of around 0 degrees Celsius. If you can read temperature here, 0, right? So it will make it up to minus 20 to 0. That's the 20 degree of superheat is there. Then you move along this line. Now, because the lines are diverging, what you will find is that delta H in this case, where there is no superheating, across the compressor will be higher than delta H for the next case where there is superheating, because the lines are diverging, because the lines are diverging. Okay. Okay. So the same thing what we are trying to show with the help of formula may also be observed using the pH chart. That is, if you go for superheating of refrigerant vapor, the delta W of compressor will be higher for the same pressure ratio, or the same pressure ratio, right? So that is also like seen with the help of this temperature T1, right? If it is increasing, it will increase the W. Now, when you are going for superheating, are you increasing cooling effect? Okay, the question is, when you are going for superheating, are you increasing cooling effect? Let's try and understand that thing with the help of this diagram and chart. So what is shown here is this is compressor, and then this is the evaporator, and the complete evaporation occurs. But then there is an extra line provided here called dryer loop. So let's say like this is producing -20, and you are increasing the temperature in this dryer loop. So it's completely evaporated by the time it enters this last loop. So now the temperature will increase. Let's say it is allowed to increase from -20 to 0°C in this dryer loop. So that may be shown on the TS diagram like this. So 4-1 is where the evaporation is occurring, and at point 1 it is completely vapor. Now temperature is increasing. Here the temperature was constant, but now the temperature is increasing, let's say from -20 to 0°C. So when you are doing this, is the cooling effect increasing? I think obviously everybody will tell that yes, cooling effect is increasing. Then I'm saying that if I compress it now, it's going to consume more work per kg of the refrigerant circulated. So cooling effect in kilojoule per kg is also higher, and the compressor work in kilojoule per kg is also higher. Now what is your COP formula? The COP formula is the delta H across the evaporator divided by delta H across the compressor. So you actually don't know whether the COP will increase, whether the COP will decrease, or it will remain same. It may depend upon different things in addition to the properties of that refrigerant. Okay, so this is true only if the superheating occurs inside the refrigerated space. You are getting some cooling effect because of that. But there is also a limit to that, because you want to maintain certain temperature here, right? So you cannot go, you cannot superheat it above that temperature, right? You cannot superheat it above. You won't be able to superheat it, or you won't want to superheat it above that temperature. And so there is a limit to this superheating inside the refrigerated space. It could be actually only a few degrees, right, inside the refrigerated space. So this could be somewhere near the peripheral area of the refrigerated space, or maybe inside the wall of the refrigerated space, and it may decrease the penetration of heat from outside, right? So, but still it is giving some useful output and may be considered the cooling effect, and that way it may help you to not to decrease the COP, right? But whatever superheating occurs outside the refrigerated space doesn't contribute anything to the cooling in the refrigerated space. So if the heat is entering from here through this suction pipeline, it's not useful at all. It's not useful at all, but it is still certainly going to increase the compressor work. So in that case, the COP is bound to decrease. in that case the COP will decrease. So if superheating is done inside the refrigerated space, you are not sure whether COP will increase, decrease, or remain constant. But if whatever superheating is occurring outside the refrigerated space will increase the compressor work and not contribute to the cooling, and because of that it will decrease the COP. So superheating outside the refrigerated space should be reduced as much as possible from point of view of thermodynamics. Right? So that's the understanding about the change in COP due to superheating. So superheating outside the refrigerated space is not desirable as per the understanding from the thermodynamics. But as like there could be some practical reasons why it might have to be done. For example, it was told that for cooling the motor winding, the most convenient option in that hermetically sealed compressor is the refrigerant vapor itself, right? So practically you may have to go for that, though theoretically from the science of thermodynamics it is not desirable. Okay. Now we talk about the next deviation, and that is subcooling of liquid refrigerant. So I already showed you or explained you what is subcooling of refrigerant vapor, refrigerant liquid when it comes out of the condenser. So when it comes out of the condenser, if the condenser is little bit oversized, then and the cooling media is at low enough temperature, then it will be completely convert into liquid, plus that liquid also will start losing heat to the ambient, for example, and it will become subcooled. Right? That's what is meant by subcooling of liquid refrigerant. So that may be done inside the condenser if the condenser is slightly over designed or the conditions are favorable at that time. The liquid refrigerant coming out of the condenser will not be at condensing temperature but would be at a lower temperature, as you have already noticed in the practical class that the condensing temperature was around 42 degrees Celsius, but the outlet of the condenser was at a lower temperature, and that was around 36 degree Celsius temperature. So that's what is subcooling. Right? Now this subcooling may be done by slightly over designing the condenser size may be increased, or it may be done in the other way. And then what is the effect of subcooling, whether it is desirable or not desirable? Now by this time you might have already realized that subcooling is favorable if you can achieve it, right? It like beyond certain point it may not be possible to achieve it because your cooling media is the limit. The temperature of the liquid refrigerant can never go below the temperature of the cooling media. Rather, it will always be somewhat higher than the temperature of the cooling media. So that is the limit of subcooling that you can achieve. But whatever subcooling is possible, you can try and achieve that. It's always advantageous. How is it advantageous? Subcooling of liquid refrigerant increases the cooling effect. Let's try and understand the first point. Cooling effect as the dryness fraction of the refrigerant at the exit would be lower. If cooling capacity of the system is kept same, refrigerant flow rate required would be less in case of cycle with subcooling. This will help to reduce compressor power required for given amount of cooling rate, and thus COP of the system will increase. So let's try and understand that with the help of, as of now, you may not look at this diagram, just have a look at this right hand side diagram. So 33- is subcooling. Now it looks a bit different on pH chart and on TS chart. On pH chart, constant pressure, so it's horizontal. But on TS diagram, constant pressure line on this side moves very near to the saturated liquid line, right? So it's actually shown on the saturated liquid line in here. So 33- is subcooling, and then you are expanding it. So what you see is 4 dash is on the left hand side of 4. So if because of subcooling, it has come out at 4 dash and not at 4. And this is the additional cooling that you get as compared to 3-4. If you move along 3 dash 4 dash, this is the additional cooling that you get. So it increases the cooling effect in kilojoule per kg, and ideally it doesn't affect the compressor work. So it's going to increase the COP. That's one of the observations or conclusion that we make looking at the change in the process on as plotted on the TS diagram, and the same thing can also be plotted on the pH diagram, and you see that the enthalpy is lower when it enters into the expansion device, and because of that the enthalpy at the outlet of the expansion device is also low, and in the same cycle you are able to achieve higher cooling in kilojoule per kg, and ideally the compressor work doesn't get affected, and because of that your COP is going to increase because you are increasing the numerator and denominator remains the same. So whatever subcooling you can achieve is always desirable, right? But of course there is a limit to that you cannot go below that you cannot never go below the temperature of the cooling media, so that sets a limit, and then you may have to make some extra investment, like if you oversize the condenser, there is an extra cost, or you may use a separate component called subcooler, that is also additional investment, and again it may increase the running cost, as we will see later. Another positive aspect of subcooling is that the mixture that is coming out of the throttling device, there will be less dryness fraction, right? Less vapor, less flashing, as it is called. Flashing means conversion to vapor. Now when that vapor is produced, the specific volume increases drastically and velocities are increased, and that hinders with the control, because the valve the passage available is very small, and high velocity hinders with the controlling function of the expansion valve. So if you go for subcooling, it is also good for better functioning of the expansion valve. Okay, so we will stop here, and uh, the things after will be discussed in the next class.